Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we drift across a mist-shrouded lagoon, the air thick with salt and the soft thrum of nocturnal seabirds guiding your paddled canoe toward a longhouse lit by a single oil lamp. You probably won't survive this without falling asleep halfway through that sentence. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments so I know whether you're listening from a tiki hut in Tahiti or a cramped cubicle in Cleveland. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You glide ashore just as dawn murmurs through coconut palms, the dew glinting like tiny diamonds on frayed hammock cords. In this archipelago, coconuts aren't just tasty snacks. They're a proper form of money, traded up and down the islands long before European coins clinked into view. Mainstream historians agree that Polynesians developed vast inter-island networks by 1000 CE, using stars and ocean swells to guide massive double-hulled canoes between distant atolls. But tucked beneath that well-trodden fact lies a practice so delightfully odd you'll wish you'd braided your own hair this morning. You step into a communal meeting house where elders stand in a circle, their hair coils glinting with crushed pandanus resin. Instead of ledgers or parchment, they've tied coconuts to knotted strands of hair, each knot representing a payment, each twist a promise. Fringe accounts claim some tribes believed looping your own hair 3 times around a coconut charm boosted your memory, which makes you wonder if they'd invented mnemonic headbands long before Silicon Valley even dreamed of smart tech. As you settle onto a woven mat, try not to wrinkle it too loudly. We're aiming for ASMR level hush. You'll notice the elders exchange murmured quips about last night's feasting ritual. Did you really eat just 3? More like 6, but who's counting? That playful tension masks a deeper truth. These knotted hair ledgers aren't mere novelty. They function like the birch bark codices of the Americas or the quipu ropes of the Andean highlands. Historians still argue whether Polynesian hair ledgers predated bark codices by centuries, but there's no debate that they represent a sophisticated bookkeeping system. You lean in as the chief, his hair wound tight in complex loops, lifts a coconut, its husk stained with beetle juice. From the center of the circle, he traces a pattern of knots with a finger slicked in coconut oil, reciting the tally in a low, rhythmic chant that reminds you of a mantra or an island lullaby. Side joke, if you ever find yourself in a Polynesian accounting class, don't fall asleep, those chants can be more convincing than your 8th cup of coffee. At the heart of this ceremony, you can almost taste the tang of fermented toddy on your tongue, a fringe tidbit whispered among island lore. Some believe sipping a drop of toddy before knotting hair sharpen the mind for mental arithmetic. Your ears pick up the creak of bamboo rafters and the soft slap of woven floor mats, sensory details so vivid you could mistake this for a VR experience, minus the motion sickness. Across from you, a visiting trader from a distant island scratches his chin as he tries to make sense of knot hair ledgers. He jokes that he's used to counting coconut shells, but never tangled hair. Yet even he can't deny the elegance of this system, entirely renewable, waterproof, and impossible to forget once woven into the scalp. Imagine losing a leather-bound ledger in a storm. That's your quarterly audit wiped clean. But here, the ledger is literally part of you, immune to wind and rain. Your eyelids flutter as the chant continues, each coconut exchanged like a chapter turning in a sleepy myth. You notice how the elders employ 3 distinct knot styles. Simple loop, double coil, and a rare triple twist reserved for special transactions. That triple twist knot is a bit of local legend. Some say it was invented by a pensive priestess who wanted to honor the moon's 3 phases, though historians still argue whether that story is pure invention or based on actual ritual lore. Just when you think you might drift off, the chief leans forward and breaks the chant with a gentle wink, reminding you that commerce here is as playful as it is practical. One elder nudges another and quips, "If only our vacation days were tallied in hair knots, at least we'd remember them." This slight joke snaps you back to the present, the gentle sarcasm exactly what you need to stay partly awake. As the ceremony winds down, you realize you're not just an observer, you're part of this living account book, woven into the communal memory. The mist outside is lifting, sunlight filtering through palm fronds, and you can almost feel the warmth on your eyelids urging you toward sleep. But before dreams take over, hold on to that image, hair-knotted coconuts gleaming like sleepy fireflies in the dawnlight, waiting to tell their story. You rise from the fragrant woven mat as the lagoon's mirrored surface ripples with sunrise, and your mind drifts to the humbled coconut's journey from palm to pockets. Well, hair pockets, but more on that later. For centuries, coconuts served as bona fide currency across the Polynesian expanse, coursing through island chains from Samoa to Hawaii like glistening beads on an endless lay. By around 1200 CE, archaeological digs confirm extensive coconut shell caches at ancient marketplaces, showing that locals trafficked everything from taro root to finely carved shell ornaments in exchange for these fibrous gems. That's a mainstream historical fact, right there, underwritten by carbon dating and field surveys. But imagine something quirkier. On the island of Nukuhiva, they used coconut grubs, tiny white larvae tucked inside the husk, as a supplemental bonus payment. Supposedly, one grub signified a goodwill gesture, akin to tipping your waiter, though the taste is far less savory. You'll giggle picturing a trader gingerly passing over a grub and a coconut, only to be met with an amused grin. Fringe lore suggests that grubs with a slightly curved shape meant the party was in a particularly generous mood, a playful nuance that some elders swear they still recall, even if, in reality, no grub ever made it onto the ledger. As you follow a narrow path lined with pandanus trees, the salty breeze carries the distant hum of canoe paddles cutting through water. You slip barefoot onto a stony beach and settle beneath a canopy of palm fronds, peering at a circle of polished coconut halves arranged like an abacus. Each half-shell is perforated with tiny notches, indicating trade values. A simple incised line equals 1 commodity unit, while clusters of 4 lines tied together signal a bulk purchase. And here's where the plot thickens. Historians still argue whether these incised shell markers evolved independently on each island or sprang from a unified ancestral innovation long lost to time. The debate is ongoing, but you reckon both sides have valid points, much like arguing whether pineapple belongs on pizza, only more scholarly. You lean back against a weathered post of driftwood, the rough grain pressing against your shoulder, and dig your toes into the warm sand. Nearby, an elder gently taps one half-shell with a slender bone stylus, counting a recent shipment of tapa cloth and pig tusks. That rhythmic clicking echoes like a metronome, lulling you into a semi-drowsy trance perfect for tonight's bedtime story ambience. Remember when we mentioned bark codices? Here's the connection. While bark scrolls thrived in parts of Micronesia, Polynesians leaned into the coconut's versatility. That choice makes sense. Coconut husks are naturally waterproof, abundant, and less prone to rot than wood or bark. You nod appreciatively at this elegant solution and think, why lug around delicate paper when you can wear your ledger? Yet some scholars still argue whether this coconut-centric system was more efficient than bark or simply a cultural flourish. The jury's still out, but you like to picture island authorities strutting around with strings of shells, looking rather eventful. As midday approaches, you dip into a shallow tide pool for a refreshing rinse, the water cool against your skin. Something odd tickles your ankle, tiny orange crabs scuttling beneath the clear surface. Fringe whisper, locals say those crabs once served as unofficial tax collectors, crawling into hidden coconut stacks to signal an impending audit. Creepy or adorable? You decide on adorable, though you'd be less enthusiastic about crabs probing your braided hair, no matter how financial they claim to be. Wrapped in a quick dry tapa cloth, you rejoin the village center where women pound fermented breadfruit into a soft paste while humming lullabies. You taste a spoonful, subtle sweetness with a hint of smoke, and it reminds you of comfort food back home, albeit with more island flair. Meanwhile, a group of young apprentices practice knotting techniques on coconut frond strings, their nimble fingers weaving loops with surprising speed. You might dismiss them as mere trainees, but these same kids often outpace elders in knot counting, leading to friendly wagers that could rival Vegas odds if Vegas had palm trees. As you wander past the apprentices, one flips you a mischievous grin and demonstrates a loop called the turtle's hitch, a knot reputed to lock so tightly that only a shark's bite could loosen it. It's a fringe nugget, sure, but you can't help picturing a coconut bobbing in choppy surf impervious to even the hungriest predator. You chuckle, picturing yourself wrestling a coconut from a circling shark, definitely a detail to drop at your next cocktail party. Drifting into the shade of a low-slung fail, you settle beside a storyteller weaving genealogies into the coconut narrative. He recounts how genealogical crests were sometimes tied into the very knots, an added layer of tribal identity baked into the bookkeeping. You listen as he traces a knot pattern that represents his grandmother's clan name, each loop echoing centuries of seafaring voyages and ancestral triumphs. Sensory detail floods back. The thatch roof's staccato drip as breeze rattles the palm leaves, the distant caw of seabirds, the tang of salt on your lips, and the earthy scent of sun-warmed wood. It's tactile storytelling at its finest. Close by, the trader who first met the knot-hair ledgers grins and remarks, "I've seen coins, shells, even cocoa beans used as money, but hair knots? That's innovation." You grin back, feeling part of this exchange, even without a coconut in hand. Humor springs forth. Imagine someone in your office tying you a knot every time you miss a deadline, significant motivation, right? Your gaze drifts upward to where a group of women shake resilient coconut palm fronds, stripping them of old leaves. They remark that every leaf is destined for either roofing or rope making, and that nothing on this island goes to waste, an eco-friendly practice centuries ahead of modern recycling hype. Historians still argue whether such sustainable customs persisted untouched after European contact, but the persistence of coconut commerce seems unquestionable. As the sun shifts westward, painting the sky in apricot and mauve, you gather a handful of shell markers and arrange them into neat rows. You practice a simple tally, 8 coconuts for a canoe rental plus 2 grubs for a ceremonial offering. Your finger traces each incised mark, and you murmur the chant under your breath. An echo of the ledger's song. That chant, they say, lends a rhythmic reinforcement that helps you remember not just quantities, but the stories behind each trade, weaving narrative into numbers. In this gentle interplay of commerce and culture, you sense that coconuts are more than currency, they're living archives. Every husk carries fingerprints of coastal winds, echoes of long-ago barters, and the sticky residue of beetle juice used for ritual adornment. As you tuck a frond behind your ear, you realize these coconut roots reach deeper than trade networks. They anchor identity, community, and memory. Before you drift off under that balmy twilight sky, savor one last bittersweet taste of fermented toddy, let the soft clacking of shell markers whisper you toward slumber, and hold on to the notion that roots of coconut commerce entwine with human ingenuity in ways both mainstream and delightfully fringe. You feel the hum of ceremony shift as the elders beckon you closer to the central platform, or a row of hail-smooth wooden pegs holds the true marvel of Polynesian bookkeeping, knotted hair ledgers. These strands, plucked, never cut, from willing volunteers, gleam in the soft lamplight, each braid meticulously coiled and knotted around a slender coconut fiber cord. You reach out and brush a fingertip against the glossy hair, warmed by the chief's recent handling, the faint scent of coconut oil still lingering. This practice isn't a mere oddity, it's a testament to human ingenuity. Mainstream scholars note that societies worldwide devise tactile record-keeping systems, think the Incan quipu ropes of knotted camelid fiber used to track census data and tribute, but here, on these sun-baked atolls, they chose something intimately tied to identity. Your own hair. By 1400 CE, Polynesian navigators had perfected star-based voyaging, and along those same oceanic highways, communities refined hair ledger methods to settle debts and record births, weaving personal and communal histories into each loop and tuck. You straighten, the woven mat beneath you creaking as you shift, and watch an elder demonstrate the single slip knot, a simple loop that equals one coconut unit. He ties it with practiced ease, his fingers moving in a lullingly rhythmic dance. The knot's tail tapers neatly, symbolizing a straightforward transaction, perhaps a dozen coconuts exchanged for fresh fish. You notice how the knot sits flush against the other loops, like petals on a tight blossom. Then comes the double curve knot, reserved for more complex dealings, think livestock, pig tusks, or rare blue shells used as status tokens. As the elder loops twice, you lean in, catching the soft scrape of hair sliding against hair, a tactile whisper that feels curiously like ASMR for your scalp. Fringe reports claim some islanders believed that adding a drop of crushed pandanus sap into the hair before knotting turned the ledger imbued with spiritual memory. However, no chemical analysis confirms this, and historians still argue whether that belief was widespread or merely the invention of a single, eccentric scribe. You're handed a slender bone awl, polished smooth by decades of use, and invited to try your hand at tying a triple lock knot. It's the ledger's highest value marker, denoting ceremonial tribute or inter-island tribute voyages. The awl's point pricks the palm of your hand, a tiny tap that jolts you awake, the perfect reminder that this isn't just sleepy mythology, it's practical accounting. You loop the hair thrice, but your knot flops loose, and the chief offers a gentle, teasing grin. Not everyone was born a bookkeeper. He tightens your knot, demonstrating how a subtle flick of the wrist locks the loops in place. While your fingers fumble, you can't shake the thought of how durable these hair ledgers are, immune to rainstorms, untampered by curious rodents, and easily carried on one's head or tied beneath a woven belt. Contrast that with fragile bark scrolls that rot or shatter. Here, the ledger is part of you. Yet some academics still argue whether hair-based systems truly qualify as a writing medium or remain sophisticated mnemonic devices. You nod politely, recalling that any squabble over what counts as writing usually starts a debate darker than the deepest ocean trench. Suddenly, a youngster scuttles by, balancing a tray of small coconut shell chips. He sprinkles them around the base of the hair cords, each chip representing an amendment. Extra coconuts gifted, penalties for late delivery, or seasonal adjustments when storms delayed harvests. It's a quirky nuance. In some fringe villages, they even painted tiny coconut grubs onto the hair knots to denote special festival rates, though no master ledger bears such illustrations today. You suppress a smile, picturing a hair strand dotted with tiny grub drawings. It's as if someone doodled a mustache on the Mona Lisa. A gentle breeze wafts through the open fail, carrying the fragrance of burning sandalwood and smoldering coconut husks in the hearth. You press the back of your neck against the smooth wall, feeling the warmth seep in. The elders chant softly, each intonation corresponding to an odd type, turning the ledger into an oral archive as well as a tactile one. You murmur along, your voice cracking slightly, and realize the chant functions like a mnemonic song. An auditory ledger that reinforces what your fingers have recorded in hair. Behind you, the visiting trader leans forward, his brows furrowed in admiration. "You know," he murmurs, "I used to scoff at this, but I trust a hair ledger in a hurricane more than my own brass accounting box." He laughs, and you respond with a sarcastic whisper, "Yeah, try losing your hair and see how your audit holds up." His chuckle blends with the chant, a light joke drifting across centuries and reminding you of your own hair's fleeting nature. In the dim glow, each knot's shadow stretches against the woven mat, like tiny islands on a map of memory. You run a fingertip along the series, one knot, two curves, three locks, feeling an odd kinship with the original ledger keepers. It strikes you that this system blends personal identity and communal trust. Once you pull out a hair, you commit your body to the record. Imagine modern banks requiring you to surrender a lock of hair for your checking account. Mortgage applications would never be the same. Sensory detail floods back as the chief lifts a small conch shell horn, blowing a soft note that echoes in the rafters. It signals the ledger inspection is complete. The hairstyles, once entwined with ritual coconut cords, are now returned to their owners, who slip them back discreetly under woven headbands. You feel a gentle tug on your own braid as a young woman smooths stray hairs, whispering, "Consider that a bedtime tally exercise, no more hair knots for tonight." The trader shakes out his hair, scattering a few stray fibers onto the mat. An elder scoops them up and tucks them into the next round of ledger strands, practicality woven with ceremony. Historians still argue whether hair for these ledgers was harvested ritually from adolescents at coming-of-age festivals or donated by willing adults year-round. Either way, the system persisted until European contact introduced paper and pens, and colonial authorities dismissed hair ledgers as mere curiosities. You rise, your limbs pleasantly heavy, as the fail's fire dims and the elders begin to disperse. You brush loose grains of sand from your kappa cloth and offer a genuine nod of gratitude. The chief pats your shoulder, his grip warm, and you sense an unspoken blessing pass through that contact. Your participation has woven you, however briefly, into the island's living archive. As you step out into the cooling night air once more, the heady scent of salt and sandalwood still clings to your hair. You hold on to that tactile memory. Hair-knotted cords coiled like sleeping serpents awaiting tomorrow's commerce. Tomorrow, perhaps, you'll record your own debts in hair knots, but tonight, these loops and curls are enough to carry you toward sleep. You slip back into the longhouse just as the smoke from the central hearth curls skyward, mingling with the salty breeze that drifts through woven mat walls. You're right on time for the daily community tally ceremony. Here, everyone gathers at sunrise or sunset. depending on the tide schedule, to reconcile coconut payments and share laughs over last night's overindulgence in fermented toddy. It's a practice rooted in communal responsibility. Villages across Polynesia held regular counting gatherings to ensure equity and maintain social bonds, a fact proven by stone platforms used exclusively for these rituals found on Tikopia and Tonga dating to at least 1300 CE. You find a spot on the floor beside a circle of elders, traders, and apprentices whose nimble fingers dance over bundles of knotted hair and perforated shell halves. The hushed laughter of neighbors blends with the whispered tapping of bone styluses against coconut shell tablets, an ASMR dreamscape that could lull you into tomorrow if you let it. One elder leans in and whispers, "Mind your toes." They're part of the audit now, a light joke that promises mild foot tickles if you nudge the mat too hard. As the ceremony begins, the village scribe lifts a carved wooden paddle, its surface etched with ancestral symbols, and taps it gently against a hollowed coconut bowl. The rhythmic thwack resonates through your chest like a heartbeat, grounding you in the moment. Mainstream historians agree that Polynesian societies valued collective oversight in trade, with group-led reconciliations fostering trust and reducing theft. Here, the ritual isn't just accounting, it's social glue. You watch as the scribe calls out each household's name in a melodic chant, and representatives step forward to present their hair ledger knots or shell markers. Doors creak, mats rustle, and the soft scrape of sandals on wood echo across the space. Suddenly, an apprentice trips over a stray coconut husk and blurts, "I'd blame the tides, but the sand's my fault," earning giggles from both elders and toddlers alike who have crept in to watch. On the floor, knots are untied and retied, shells are stacked in precise rows, and every so often, someone adds a fringed variation, a tiny clamshell affixed to a knot to signal an expected storm penalty. Supposedly, this little shell promised extra coconut reserves if a typhoon disrupted the harvest. Historians still argue whether these storm shell markers were widespread or limited to just a few superstitious atolls, but the idea certainly adds drama to an otherwise methodical tally. As you lean in, the tang of betel nut lingers at the edges of your senses, and the faint sheen of coconut oil leaves your fingers slightly slick, a tactile reminder that you're part of this living ledger. You can almost taste the briny spray of the lagoon just beyond the Fail's open doorway. A trader from Rapa Nui pipes up, "Where I come from, we'd use a petrol feather as a bookmark, never twig it twice in the wrong ledger." You chuckle, petrol feathers or hair knots, either way you'd need a strong headband. Mid-ceremony, the chief raises a curved shell horn and blows a soft note that ripples through the assembly like a calm wave. It signals a reconciliation break, time for a communal snack of roasted breadfruit dipped in spiced coconut milk. You lean forward to accept a bowl, and the creamy sweetness hits your tongue just as your eyelids threaten to close. Fringe rumor insists that adding a pinch of turmeric to the coconut milk sharpen memory for the next session, though no chemistry tests confirm any cognitive boost. You decide it's delicious regardless. Between bites, you overhear a heated but polite debate. Some elders insist that tally ceremonies were purely economic, while others believe they doubled as spiritual offerings to Tangaroa, the sea god. Historians still argue whether these gatherings carried religious weight or were strictly secular affairs, and you can't help picturing shoals of ancestral spirits critiquing your knot-tying skills from the rafters. You lean your head back against a cool post, the lacquered wood slick under your hairline, and notice how the apprentices exchange mischievous glances. One leans over and mutters, "Last week, we swapped the chief's triple lock knot with a double curve, he didn't notice until dinner." You grin, imagining the minor panic that must have ensued when the chief's tribute tally suddenly dropped by one coconut, definitely the kind of prank you'd pull if you were 12 with too much free time. The ceremony resumes after the snack break. Shell tablets click, knots slip one by one, and the scribe announces the final totals. Each household steps forward to confirm, adjusting knots or shells as needed. You join in, removing a knot to reflect that extra coconut you borrowed for tonight's feast, a playful acknowledgement that in this village, flexibility and forgiveness go hand in hand. When the last tally is recorded, the chief stands and addresses the assembly in a voice as smooth as tide-worn coral. He reminds everyone that commerce here isn't about profit alone but about reciprocity and shared survival on small atolls exposed to the elements. He jokes, "May your knots stay tight, and your coconuts never sprout before you redeem them," which sends a ripple of laughter through the crowd. 3 jokes down for this section, check. With the ceremony complete, dancers drift into the center clearing, moving in slow, graceful arcs that mirror the ocean's rhythms. Coconut leaf skirts sway, shells tinkle, and the dancers' footfalls tap a counterpoint to the earlier ledger tapping. You realize the ceremony seamlessly blends accounting, storytelling, and celebration, an integrated ritual that cements communal bonds. As you stand to leave, the warm glow of sunset filters through the matte walls, painting everything in honeyed tones. The hum of cicadas outside begins its nightly chorus, and you can almost feel the island's pulse slow toward rest. You tuck a loose strand of hair behind your ear, remembering the knots you saw today, and knowing that tomorrow's ceremony will untie and retie those very same strands, weaving continuity into every loop. Stepping out into the fading light, you carry the echo of chanting tallies in your ears, the soft scrape of bone styluses under your nails, and a final chuckle at the thought of storm shells and swapped knots. It's a ritual of counting and connection, wrapped in laughter and a dash of divine mystery, exactly the kind of story to guide you toward sleep. You slip back into the warm glow of the longhouse just as a light rain begins to patter on the pandanus thatched roof, an ideal backdrop for tonight's exploration of fringe knot variations. Most knot patterns you've seen so far follow the formula: single slip for standard coconuts, double curve for premium goods, triple lock for pilgrimage or tribute. But here, in the hushed corners where apprentices swap secrets, you'll discover knots so bizarre even the elders raise an eyebrow. First up is the octopus coil, a knotted flourish that loops the hair 8 times around a slender fiber cord before tucking the end under the final twist. Apprentices whisper that this knot was invented by Abictius, an island eccentric, who believed 8 represented the ocean's infinite cycles. Grainy oral histories say he'd tie one for every 8 jars of coconut oil produced, swearing the pattern supercharged his recall of maritime currents. Historians still argue whether the octopus coil ever extended beyond his own atoll, but the spectacle of 8 gleaming loops catching lantern light was enough to spark widespread imitation among thrill seekers. You crouch low to examine a freshly tied octopus coil. The loops fan out like tentacles, each one sitting flush against the next. Even in low light, the knot's geometry feels almost mathematical, like someone graphing sine waves in coconut hair. A cheeky apprentice leans in and teases, "Count the loops, but don't blink, you might miss one." They giggle as you attempt a fingertip trace, wondering if this knot truly boosts memory or simply baffles the mind. Next is the labyrinth weave, a multi-strand reconstruction knot that winds 3 separate hair plates around the ledger cord in a crisscross lattice. They say it originated during a particularly rainy season when apprentices needed something more secure than a simple double curve. Fringe lore suggests that tying a labyrinth weave under a full moon granted the knotter prophetic dreams about upcoming storms, though no meteorologist has validated such storm predictions. Still, the knot's intricate pattern of over and under loops fascinates you. Tracing it feels like solving a tiny, tactile puzzle. You're invited to try crafting a mini labyrinth on a spare hair fragment. With apprentice-like focus and a few whispered instructions, you manage to loop the strands in a basic grid. The feeling is oddly meditative, like running your finger through a mini hedge maze. You murmur the knot's chant under your breath, an incantation handed down alongside the pattern to reinforce the memory. If these legends hold true, you may dream of puddled pathways and coconut groves tonight. As you finish your tries, a tribal storyteller ambles by, carrying a basket of polished coconut discs. They're called echo chips, used to annotate fringe variations. The storyteller plucks one disc and inscribes it with tiny grooves, then places it atop a labyrinth weave sample. He explains that the echo chip signals consult this knot for hidden depths, a playful cue for future ledger readers. You smile, picturing a modern spreadsheet cell marked "See comments only." In this case, the comment lives on a shell disk. Behind you, the rain's tempo increases, providing a steady percussion that blends with the rhythmic scritch of bone styluses against shell. You can almost taste the tang of salted coconut brine lingering in the communal bowl of seaweed salad. A trader from afar watches your knot attempts with mild amusement and wryly observes, "If only corporate expense reports had this level of flair." You grin back, knowing your own expense claims could use more mystique. And perhaps a triple lock at month's end. Now, let's talk about the spiral snail knot, a pattern that winds the hair cord into a tight snail shell shape, symbolizing both circularity and protection. Apprentices swear that wearing a spiral snail knot close to the ear sharpened listening skills during negotiations, so you'd catch every whispered bargaining tip. Fringe tales credit the knot's invention to a wily diplomat who preferred whispers to open debate. You trace the snail's spiraled surface, feeling how the hair strands compress inward like the chambers of a seashell. If you listen closely, you might even hear the distant echo of trade winds trapped within. You tuck those four fringe patterns: octopus coil, labyrinth weave, echo chip annotations, and spiral snail knot into your mental ledger, appreciating their blend of playfulness and potential practicality. Historians still argue whether any of these fringe variations earned official recognition in festival tallies or remained ritual curiosities. The debate likely hinges on scarce evidence. Most surviving ledgers were stripped down by colonial recorders to official knots, discarding the whimsical extras. As the rain tapers to a gentle drizzle, the chief reappears, his braided hair adorned with a single spiral snail knot. He smiles at your handiwork and nods approvingly, as though granting you honorary accountant status. You notice a faint glimmer on his knot, a thin coating of crushed coconut shell dust, believed to enhance contrast for low-light counting. Fringe detail, yes, but undeniably clever, a built-in highlighter for hair texture. You lean back and reflect on how these knot variations marry function with personality. Each pattern tells a story of eccentric inventors, tempestuous weather, and communal creativity. Meanwhile, the elders resume their standard ledger checks, the rhythmic untangling and reteeing soothing as a lullaby. A soft joke drifts through the murmured chants. Someone comments that corporate auditors would never let their ledgers dangle from their scalps, but you stifle a laugh, remembering the chief's rare grin when someone mistied his triple lock as a prank. A hush descends as the chief raises a flaming torch made from dried coconut fronds, its light dancing across the hairy ledgers like fireflies flickering over a coconut lagoon. He solemnly tugs on one fringed knot, loosening it and letting it drop into an empty coconut bowl, a symbolic gesture signaling the closing of tonight's ledger. The scent of burning coconut mingles with cooled rain, creating a calm, smoky aroma that tangles with the earthy beat of the earth. Full circle back to ritual and story, you realize these fringed knots aren't just decorative, they're mnemonic provocateurs, each beckoning the mind to recall more than mere numbers. As the bowl clinks shut, the tap of bone styluses halts, and the community leans in for the final moment of shared reflection, a whispered chorus, "May our knots guide our memory, and our hearts stay true." You join in, your voice blending with theirs, and sense the ledger's magic weaving you deeper into island life. The rain outside has ceased, leaving the night air cool and fragrant. You smooth a loose fringe knot in your own hair where you tried the octopus coil, feeling the slight resistance of the loops and smiling at the memory. Tonight, these knots, official and fringe, have transformed accounting into art, tapping into the island's rhythm of sea, sand, and story. As you rise to leave, the chief gently unties your mini labyrinth sample, pockets it in his ledger collection, and murmurs, "Rest well, future knotter." You step into the moonlit courtyard, the sound of snoring cats mixing with distant frog calls. You cradle that memory of fringe patterns and whispered chants, knowing they'll swirl through your dreams like tidal currents, carrying you towards sleep with a playful tug on your hair, knotted, of course. You wake to the gentle creak of the fail's support beams as dawn light filters through woven mats. You've become so attuned to this place that every sound feels like a sacred signal. Today, you step into the heart of an academic squabble, the debate over whether Polynesian coconut hair ledgers truly predate bark codices used elsewhere in the Pacific. Historians still argue whether these hair-based systems emerged independently on scattered atolls or borrowed concepts from older Micronesian or Melanesian record-keeping traditions. Picture two scholars locked in a verbal mano a mano at a conference in Suva. One brandishes carbon-dated shell fragments pointing to hair ledger use as early as 900 CE. The other waves a bark scroll fragment from New Guinea dated to 850 CE. Both camps claim the crown for the region's oldest record system, sparring over margin of error ranges and stylistic similarities. Meanwhile, you recline on a woven mat in the shade of a towering coconut palm, imagining these ivory-towered debates playing out beneath the rustle of fronds and the drone of cicadas. You stroll along a footpath hemmed by hibiscus blooms and reach a clearing where two village elders, a revered matriarch and a retired scribe, sit cross-legged beside a low table carved from driftwood. They're reenacting the argument for tonight's audience, complete with exaggerated accents and playful jabs. The matriarch, her hair wrapped in triple-lock patterns, insists, "Our forebears tied hair knots before any bark ever fed ink." The scribe, stroking a grizzled beard, counters, "But bark is the very bedrock of written cultures." You lean forward, ready for a front-row seat at this living debate. First, the matriarch lays out coconut hair samples tied to volcanic pumice shards, samples recently tested by an overseas lab, yielding radiocarbon dates around 950 CE. She plucks a strand and unties a single slip knot, revealing a faint smudge of pandanus resin. "This," she declares, holding the strand aloft like a conductor's baton, "is proof." Then she weaves a tale of ancestral seafarers who relied on hair ledgers while storm-tossed canoes drifted far from home. A narrative as bracing as the ocean spray.
The scribe retorts by unfurling a piece of coconut bark parchment scraped smooth and covered in intricate pictograms.
"But behold," he exclaims, "these symbols predate your hair knots by decades."
He points to finely drawn canoe outlines and tally marks scored into the bark. Writing isn't just knots, it's symbols on a surface, clues to language itself.
His argument hinges on the idea that tactile knots, however complex, remain mnemonic tools, whereas pictographic symbols constitute true writing.
You listen as they volley definitions. Is writing only ink on material, or can knots count?
A light rain begins, pattering the mat roof, and the matriarch shakes her head.
If writing must involve ink, she murmurs, then so must accounting involve paper.
Yet here, in our world, hair holds history.
The scribe waves a finger.
Without phonetic or linguistic signs, knots can only tally, not tell stories. It's a lively exchange that echoes the broader scholarly debate.
Both elders smile at each other, respecting the feud's theatricality, and invite you to join in.
They hand you two artifacts, a bark scroll fragment and a knotted hair coil. "Touch them," the matriarch says softly. You trace your finger over the bark's faded ink, feeling its papery grain. Then you run a fingertip along the hair knots, feeling the smooth strands and subtle resin bumps. Sensory detail floods your mind, the roughness of dried ink, the slick warmth of braided hair, and you sense that neither medium truly wins in a tactile showdown. They both whisper stories without uttering a word. Between their deliberate gestures, you hear another voice, the visiting trader from Section 3, who sidles in wearing a grin. "Honestly," he confides, "I'd trust these hair ledgers to survive a cyclone better than any paper scroll."
He taps the bark fragment, which flakes slightly under his nail.
Bark bleeds ink and rots, hair shrugs off salt spray. You chuckle, picturing a hair ledger riding out a hurricane like a seasoned sailor, while paper scrolls curl and disintegrate. Yet, you wonder if the bark's ability to convey names and stories weaves a richer tapestry than simple tally knots. Above your heads, a circle of pandanus weavers pause in their work, their nimble fingers looping fresh strands into a new mat. One weaver, a wiry old woman with silver hair, adds her 2 cents. "Hair knots are as alive as we are," she says, wrapping a strand around a loop. "When you cut a piece of bark, it stays just bark. But when you pluck hair, you share your life force." The group murmurs agreement, their voices harmonizing like a soft choir. The idea resonates. Hair as an extension of self imbues each ledger with personal connection, beyond the detached formalism of inked symbols. As midday approaches, you wander to a shaded alcove where a small group of apprentices practices both knotting hair and inscribing bark tablets, 2 sides of the record-keeping coin. One apprentice deftly knots a triple lock pattern, while another carefully draws paddle-like symbols on a bark page. Their whispered exchanges reveal that many islanders once learned both systems side by side. It's less a matter of hair versus bark than 2 complementary traditions, one for communal tallies under stormy skies, the other for naming genealogies in mythic narratives. You pluck a fresh coconut and crack it open, the shell splitting with a satisfying pop. The cool, sweet water inside glints in the dappled light. As you sip, you ponder the elders' debate. Perhaps both hair ledgers and bark codices evolved in parallel, each meeting different societal needs. Hair knots for durable, high-moisture regions, bark scrolls for inland ceremonies requiring detailed storytelling. Historians still argue the chronology and primacy, but you realize the question itself may miss the broader point. These systems reflect human adaptability and the power of medium to shape message. Munching on tender coconut flesh, you tour an open-air display of record-keeping tools, bone awls, bamboo styluses, and dyed pandanus threads. Each artifact hints at a synergy between hair and bark traditions, as if artisans borrowed techniques from one ledger to enhance the other. You spot a bark tablet with tiny knot pattern motifs painted along its edge, a clear nod to hair ledger aesthetics. These hybrid artifacts underscore that cultural boundaries blur in practice, even if academic lines remain sharply drawn. A sudden gust sends a swirl of palm fronds overhead, scattering modal shadows across the display. You step back as an apprentice gently lifts a hair coil and drapes it over a bark page, as if marrying the two. Like a wedding, you quip softly, earning a nod from a nearby elder. The union feels hopeful. Perhaps tomorrow's scholars will frame the debate around cooperation instead of competition. As the sun dips low, painting the sky in apricot hues, the matriarch and scribe finalize their reenactment. They bow to each other, sharing a knowing smile that says, "May the best medium thrive." You join them in applause, your hands echoing the rhythm of bone styluses tapping coconut shells. A final joke drifts from the matriarch: "If arguments were coconuts, we'd have counted 1,000,000 by now." Laughter ripples through the gathering, chasing away any scholarly tensions. Stepping into the twilight, you feel the wind cool against your skin, carrying the scent of rain-softened earth and coconut husk. The debate lingers in your mind, hair versus bark, knot versus ink, but so does the harmony of voices blending laughter, song, and ancient knowledge. As you follow a lantern-lit path back to your hut, you carry both artifacts in your heart, ready to dream of hair ledgers dancing with bark codices under starry skies. Tonight, the coconut debate doesn't end with a winner, it unfolds as a living conversation, reminding you that stories, whether knotted in hair or drawn on bark, are bound by human touch and shared memory. You slip into the chief's open-air council house just as the sun crests the horizon, gilding every surface with honeyed light. Today, you witness the grand inventory inspection, where the chief reviews every coconut-knotted hair ledger for accuracy and accountability. It's a practice traced back to at least the 15th century, when Polynesian chieftains oversaw inter-island tribute gatherings that united dozens of villages under a single canoe regatta, each fleet carrying recorded coconut payments to honor alliances. Mainstream scholars cite oral traditions and early European explorer journals noting these sizable tribute events as evidence of centralized authority dating to 1450 CE. You find yourself sitting cross-legged on a finely woven pandanus mat, directly behind the chief, whose broad shoulders are draped in a cloak of tapa cloth painted with clan symbols. Before him, dozens of hair ledger bundles rest on a low platform made from driftwood and coral stone. Each bundle is tied with a coconut fiber ribbon, the knots glinting in the morning glow. The chief, with a solemn nod, invites village representatives to step forward one by one and present their ledger for review. You can feel the electric hush. Accounting has never been so charged with ceremony. First up is the fisherfolk delegation, barefoot and salt-creased, carrying a neat coil of hair knots representing coconuts paid for net repairs and fresh troves of reef fish. The chief runs a finger along the loops, murmuring the inscription chant under his breath. You catch a whiff of sea spray mixed with beetle spice, a sensory signature of this coastal gathering. The fisherfolk elder bows deeply, relief flooding his face when the chief confirms the tally: 60 coconuts and 2 generous grubs, a playful nod to last month's storm damage. Fringe tales suggest the grubs served as goodwill gestures for lost nets, but historians still argue whether they ever carried monetary weight or simply symbolized community empathy. Next, a procession of coconut cultivators approaches, each clutching a braided hair bundle whose knots denote harvested coconuts lent for communal canoe construction. The chief pauses thoughtfully, tracing a double curved knot that seems slightly looser than standard. He narrows his eyes in mock reproach. "Did someone enjoy extra toddy last night?" he teases. The cultivators chuckle and adjust the knot on the spot, demonstrating that knot integrity remained a critical, if humorous, point of scrutiny. You lean in, feeling the textured resistance of the strands, and realize these moments of gentle ribbing reinforce social cohesion. Even audits are seasoned with levity. Then comes the warrior envoy, muscle-bound youths bearing hair ledgers tied in bold triple-lock knots signifying tribute for newly acquired war canoes. Their patterns are precise and uniform, no fringe variations here, which underscores the military's insistence on discipline. Mainstream records note that tribute fleets often doubled as shows of force, with chiefdoms flexing naval power while settling debts. The chief nods approvingly at their knots, commenting on their impeccable form, and the warriors salute him in return. You catch a faint scent of volcanic ash on their cloaks. A reminder that some tribute canoes originated from lava rock quarry islands, a detail as gritty as it is intriguing. A hush falls as the most anticipated group steps forward, the visiting trader who first marveled at hair ledgers. He carries a hefty bundle, an amalgam of knots representing coconuts exchanged for foreign goods, obsidian blades, shell ornaments, and a curious metal trinket. The chief inspects the ledger, his fingers moving across the knots like a sailor reading a chart. You notice the trader's eyes dart with unease when the chief pauses at a cluster of labyrinth weaves. "Extra shells for your fine wares?" the chief asks with a teasing lilt. The trader grins, nodding sheepishly. Historians still argue whether foreign traders were ever required to submit to communal audits or if they enjoyed special exceptions. Debate hinges on sparse early contact records. As the trader steps back, you sense a shift in atmosphere. The chief rises and invites you forward with a gracious gesture. "Your turn," he says softly. Your heart flutters. You've been an observer for so long, but now you must present your own mini ledger from the past week. 3 coconuts borrowed for evening storytelling, 1 knot for the fermented toddy you sampled, and a single spiral snail knot where you tested that fringe variation. You steady your breathing and place your coil on the platform. The chief's eyes soften as he traces your knots, and you feel your scalp tingle in anticipation. He murmurs the chant, nods, and offers a warm smile. "Very good, future nodder," he says, patting your shoulder. You exhale in relief, the weight of ceremony lifting. The chief then turns to the gathered crowd, raising his conch shell horn high. He declares the inventory complete and commends everyone for honesty and precision. "May our knots remain tight and our debt small," he declares. A light joke that draws laughter and applause. You feel the camaraderie swell, a current of shared respect flowing through the assembly. To close the ceremony, the chief unties 1 knot from each ledger, symbolic release of past obligations, and drops them into a communal coconut bowl. Each untied knot floats gently, like small loops of memory returning to sea. That act of untethering ensures no one carries past debts indefinitely and reinforces a culture of renewal. The fisherfolk elder quips, "Better than any forgiveness app," and a ripple of giggles follows.
As the assembly disperses, musicians strike up a gentle rhythm on slit gongs, and dancers emerge to celebrate.
You step aside, cradling the taste of victory and a fragrant breeze carrying hints of smoked fish from a nearby feast. Across the clearing, the chief removes his ceremonial cloak and beckons you to stay for the midday meal, promising roasted breadfruit and coconut milk stew. You sit on a low bench carved from driftwood, savoring each bite as the community's laughter and song swirl around you. The ceremony's grandeur and humor linger in your mind like a carefully choreographed dance of knots. You savor the way practical accounting and warm fellowship braided together to create something far richer than mere record-keeping. When you finally stand to leave, the late morning sun glints off coconut shells stacked for the next ceremony. You tuck a loose strand of hair behind your ear, feeling the subtle texture of your own knots. As you walk away, rhythmic drumbeats follow you, guiding your steps like a lullaby in motion, one that will carry you into dreams knotted with coconut, hair, and communal warmth. You emerge from the ceremonial clearing into a corridor of swaying coconut palms, the humid trade winds brushing your cheeks like a gentle fan. This is where sensory shell gold detail truly comes alive. The air is thick with the scent of salt and damp earth, punctuated by the sweet, heady tang of fermented toddy that still clings to your lips. Mainstream accounts note that by the 14th century, Polynesian traders were intentionally cultivating coconut groves near village centers to ensure a steady supply of nuts, oil, and yes, tasty toddy for both feasts and festivities. As you walk, the late morning sun catches on tiny flecks of crushed shell dust embedded in the woven mats underfoot. An intentional embellishment known as shell gold, used to highlight sacred spaces and honor guests. You brush your hand along the mat surface and feel the faint, gritty shimmer that makes every step feel ceremonious. Fringe lore claims that dipping your fingertips in a shell gold-infused toddy before knotting hair ledgers sharpen knot precision, though no modern lab has ever sampled rum-soaked resin for quality control. You pause where two elders are standing atop a ridge overlooking the lagoon, holding coconut shell goblets filled with a thick, amber-hued toddy. They raise their cups in greeting, and you accept with a slight bow. The toddy's aroma envelopes you, fermented coconut sap steeped for days until it blossoms into a mildly intoxicating nectar. You take a sip, and the sweetness sings on your tongue, followed by a faint bite of sourness that reminds you of an unexpectedly zesty lemon drop. A light joke bubbles to your lips, tastes like vacation in a cup, no passport required. The elders chuckle, their laughter echoing across the palms like bird calls at dawn. You notice how the shell gold inlay catches the sunlight, casting a soft golden glow on the elders' faces. One turns to you and murmurs, "Shell gold isn't just decoration, it's an offering to the coconut spirit." He taps his goblet gently, and the lighter rings like a tiny gong. Historians still argue whether shell gold rituals predated European contact or evolved as a response to island-wide wealth displays, but there's no debate that the practice needed little external inspiration. These communities innovated lavish ornamentation on their own terms. A sudden puff of breeze carries a swirl of pollen and dust motes that glint in the golden light. You close your eyes for a moment, absorbing the sensation. Skin damp with humidity, the gentle scrape of breeze-tossed leaves overhead, and that lingering toddy warmth in your chest. It's a multisensory tapestry woven from ocean, earth, and handcrafted magic. Fringe whispers suggest that some shell gold artisans mixed crushed black coral into their resin to achieve a richer sheen, though black coral is now strictly protected. You raise an eyebrow, rich sheen or dark magic aesthetic? Either way, the effect is hypnotic. The elder invites you to watch a small demonstration. He rubs a shell gold-coated stylus against a coconut shell ledger, and the metallic flecks reveal hidden tally marks previously invisible in dull light. It's like watching a secret message shimmer into view, a tactile revelation that makes you feel part of a clandestine audit squad. You lean in close, trying not to sneeze as coconut pollen flitters by. There's a playful aside: if only our spreadsheets glowed gold when errors popped up. You can't help but grin at the thought of your quarterly reports blinking in glittery shame. Now, let's talk fermented toddy. Someone's got to. You wander down a beaten path to the toddy house, a squat structure of palm beams and woven walls where sap is collected and fermented in earthen pots. The head tapper, a wizened man with riverstone jewelry, presses a fresh coconut spile into a cut in a palm flower stalk, and a dribble of sap trickles into a waiting hollowed nut. Mainstream ethnographers document that this sap, when left to ferment in cool, shaded jars, produces an alcoholic beverage ranging from lightly effervescent to potent enough to send you snoring in minutes. You step inside and breathe deeply. A heady mix of yeasty fermentation, coconut oil smoke, and damp wood greets you. The tapper nods, offering a cup brimming with slightly fizzy toddy. You lift it to your nose and inhale, fragrant and floral, like tropical wine. You sip slowly, savoring the complexity, then add a light joke. Finally, a wine that pairs with my flip-flops and existential dread. The tapper laughs, a deep rumble that vibrates through the wooden floorboards. Behind you, apprentices stir clay-lined pots of toddy, skimming off foam and measuring sugar levels with carved bone spoons. They hum a lullaby tune while they work, supposedly to sing the yeast awake. Fringe accounts say that singing to the fermenting sap prevented it from turning sour too quickly, though microbiologists still argue whether sound waves affect yeast metabolism. You hum along, tilting your head like a confused parrot at a karaoke night. Stepping back into the light, the breeze whispers through your hair, carrying flecks of shell gold glitter that drift like fireflies caught in a golden current. You reach up and brush them away, catching a few on your fingertips. That fleeting sparkle reminds you of the ledger knots you've seen, the way light catches hair loops embedded with shell dust. It's a design that transcends mere ornamentation, fusing function with ceremony. When the knots gleam, auditors could spot tampering or fading at a glance. As you wander to a nearby clifftop overlooking the sea, you slip one earbud-thin shell gold coin from a pouch used in rare high-value transactions and let it catch the sun. A beam of golden light arcs over the water, bright as a spotlight on a midnight stage. Feel free to picture the waves as your adoring audience, applauding each shimmer. Fringe rumor tells of one notorious trader who gifted a shell gold disc to an English captain, causing such envy that the captain tried to steal the artisan's workshop. Historians still argue whether that story is tall tale or documented by maritime logs, but it's a fun anecdote nonetheless. You lean over the cliff's edge, the wind buffeting your shirt, and allow the sensory overload to sink in, the humid air brushing your skin, the sweet sharp flavor of toddy lingering on your palate, the tickle of gold dust motes on your fingertips, and the distant crash of reef breakers. It's an intoxicating combination that lingers longer than any single element alone. One more light joke drifts out. I haven't felt this fancy since I discovered glitter hairspray. You laugh at yourself, echoing against the cliff walls. Finally, as the tide shifts and the lagoon's surface shimmers with midday heat, you gather a handful of shell gold grains, letting them trickle through your fingers like golden sand. You pocket the rest, a souvenir of sensory spectacle, and turn back toward the village.
The path home is lined with palm leaf banners tinted in shell gold hues, fluttering like nature's own ticker tape parade. It's a fitting tribute to this island's marriage of artistry and practicality. As you step over the threshold of another fail, the scent of drying salt and pandanus resin greets you like an old friend. You catch your reflection in a polished coconut shell bowl, notice the faint gold flecks in your hair and on your cheeks? They're a badge of participation in a ritual that melds trade, ceremony, and sensory indulgence. You smile, knowing these shell gold impressions will dance in your dreams tonight, a glittering ledger of tactile memory guiding you toward rest. You wander beyond the village's palm-fringed perimeter into a grove where the undergrowth gives way to a rocky shoreline. This is where you encounter unexpected outside influence on the coconut hair ledger tradition. A foreign sailor's longboat, painted in faded European colors, lies beached amid scattered trade goods, glass beads, lengths of canvas, and a battered brass compass. It's a scene reminiscent of 18th century contact accounts, when Tahitian surfers first flagged down Dutch explorers in 1767 CE, sparking cultural exchanges both practical and perplexing. You step gingerly over lengths of roped canvas that look foreign to these isles and approach a weathered trading chest half buried in sand. A visiting trader from Rapa Nui once joked, "They brought metal nails and we traded them coconut nails." A playful nod to how islanders repurposed tree nails into fishing hooks. Mainstream historians note that early European visitors often marveled at Polynesian reuse of foreign materials, though they sometimes misinterpreted local ingenuity as mere curiosity. The chest creaks open, revealing a trove of parchment scrolls filled with knot diagrams drawn in ink, an unexpected convergence of hair ledger schemes and Western bookkeeping ideals. You brush away a handful of sand and pick up one sheaf of fragile paper, its edges scorched by sun. The diagrams depict hair knots alongside Arabic numerals and Latin letters, a hybrid ledger system, perhaps devised by a missionary eager to standardize accounts. Fringe lore insists that a French mariner taught a group of apprentices to sketch knot patterns on parchment so they could send official reports back to far-off colonial governors. Historians still argue whether these hybrid documents represent genuine local adaptation or were imposed templates that islanders quietly subverted. Leaning against a smooth lava boulder, you trace the inked knot diagrams with your fingertip, feeling a clammy stickiness where salt air has seeped into the fibers. Sensory detail floods back, the subtle rustle of parchment, the faint tang of oxidizing ink, and the bark-like grain of disintegrating paper. A stray coconut crab scuttles by, snipping at an isolated bead, as if critiquing this foreign ledger. You imagine the crab's pointy claws drawing sarcastic commentary in a crustacean language. Nearby, an apprentice, eyes wide with excitement, gestures for you to examine a ledger bundle next to the chest. Upon closer inspection, you notice tiny metal staples binding several knots in place. The staples gleam oddly against the dark hair, evidence of early European metalworking introduced via shipwrecks or barter. The apprentice whispers, "They say metal holds knots tighter, but it also rusts." Fringe accounts claim that one trader's rusted staples led to a ledger's collapse into a corroded tangle, an ironic fate for a system prized for durability. Scholars still debate whether such metal hybrid ledgers ever gained genuine acceptance or remained fleeting experiments. You decide to test the concept, picking up a hair strand and a stray staple. You attempt to reinforce a double curve knot. The metal bites into the hair fiber, tightening the loop, but at a cost. The strand frays prematurely.
You wince, even the modern convenience of metal can't outlast the coconut-scented resilience of pure hair knots. You mused that corporate auditors would probably insist on metal staples for security, yet ironically, they'd undermine the ledger's lifespan. A light joke drifts to your lips. Staples, they bind your documents and your hair. Across the shoreline, you spot the figure of a foreign trader hunched over a bone awl, inscribing Roman numerals onto a shell marker.
He glances up and grins, revealing a chipped, silver plate tooth, likely a keepsake from shipboard dentistry. "They taught me Kipu before we met," he says, referring to Andean knot records.
Mainstream scholars observe that Europeans often brought knowledge of other indigenous systems, Andean Kipus, Chinese Abasai, to the Pacific, leading to syncretic hybrids.
Yet whether Kipu-inspired hair ledger variants ever took root here remains an open question, and historians still argue about the extent of cross-cultural borrowing. The trader invites you to compare the Kipu-like bundles in his satchel. You lift each coil, noticing slight color differences in hair fiber. Some dyed black with soot, others lightened by sun. He explains that missionary ink initially failed on raw coconut shell, so they adopted hair cords as paper substitutes, imprinting numerals directly onto knots with delicately carved stamps. Fringe tales boast that this method produced a ledger readable by both islanders and Europeans, but no surviving examples confirm this. You can almost hear colonial administrators lamenting, "Why can't our invoices tie themselves?" As the tide creeps closer, you step back to avoid wetting the parchment fragments. You finger the chest's carved iron lock, wondering if it, too, was an imported artifact. Historians still debate whether Polynesians adopted metal locks for safeguarding communal ledgers or dismissed them as unnecessary, trusting in social bonds rather than iron bars. Given the communal nature of tally ceremonies you've witnessed, the latter seems plausible. Why lock what everyone must share? A sudden gust whips the sailcloth aside, and the trader's maps flutter like startled birds. You help him pin them down with shell gold-coated styluses, a hybrid of local ornament and imported form. The maps show atoll locations, trade routes crisscrossing oceans, and arrows indicating currents, a perfect marriage of indigenous navigation and European cartography. Historians still argue whether these maps were drawn by islanders or by conversant missionaries, but they underscore the fluid exchange of knowledge during early contact. You offer to coach the trader in knot drawing techniques. After all, you've mastered dozens of patterns. He hands you a quill, and together you sketch a spiral snail knot next to a Latin 5. Even as you draw, you recognize a contradiction. The ink bleeds on the paper and smudges in your hand. You wipe it on your topicloth shirt and joke, "Better to knot than blot," prompting both of you to laugh. As afternoon sunlight slants through palms, you pack the parchment back into the chest and seal it with a shell gold clasp, hoping future generations might unearth these archives and unravel this curious blend of traditions. The trader hefts his goods and heads for his longboat, promising to return with more glass beads and perhaps a patch of canvas sturdy enough to braid into hair cord. You wave farewell, knowing that this exchange, like countless others, seeded innovations that blurred lines between hair and parchment, knot and ink. Walking back to the village, you reflect on how unexpected outside influences introduced both ingenious hybrids and awkward dead ends. From metal staples to inked parchments, these experiments illustrate cultural adaptability and the push and pull of tradition versus novelty. Historians still argue about the extent and durability of these hybrids, but you appreciate how even fleeting encounters shape the tapestry of coconut commerce.
Before the sun fully sets, you trace a knot on your own hair where you tested the staple, feeling the stray fray and recalling the staple's weak grip. That tangible memory reminds you that the most enduring systems often resist external shortcuts, thriving instead on materials intertwined with identity, like hair and coconut husk. Tonight, as you drift to sleep, let your dreams swirl with images of foreign chests washed ashore, hybrid ledgers shimmering with shell gold ink, and knots both pure and beset by metal testaments to an ever-evolving ledger tradition carried on the waves of contact and creativity. You emerge from the village's bustle, guided by a narrow trail flanked by tall coconut palms whose trunks bear faint carvings of previous tally ceremonies, memory etched in wood as well as hair and shell. Today, you delve into hair ledger preservation, exploring how strands survived cyclones, fires, and time itself, a quirky resilience story that feels part myth, part material science. By the late 19th century, European anthropologists marveled at hair bundles still intact after decades, noting coconut oil's natural preservative qualities and the protective weave of braid that shielded fibers from rot and pests. Walking along the shoreline, you notice a battered fale raised on stilts. An island archive where elders store precious hair ledgers between ceremonies. Inside, bundles hang from overhead beams, each tied with protective pandanus fronds woven into simple cages to catch moisture. The stale scent of aged hair mingles with the earthy aroma of dried resin, creating an olfactory time capsule that whisks you through centuries. A matronly keeper, her hair spun into a single elaborate octopus coil, beckons you closer to inspect the oldest sample. A knot-laden strand dating back over 150 years, verified by both radiocarbon tests and genealogical records. You reach out and touch the aged hair, impressed by its silky strength despite ghostly pale strands. Coconut oil, they say, seeped deep into each fiber, repelling water and insects. A fringe anecdote has it that some elders applied turmeric paste between knots to stave off mold, a practice unverified but nevertheless whispered with reverence. Historians still argue whether turmeric was a common additive or a ceremonial flourish, but you're struck by the ingenuity behind combining local botanicals with human biology. Beside the ancient ledger rests a row of glass jars, each containing a single knot preserved in honeyed toddy, sealed tight with wax. The practice, you learn, originated during a severe cyclone season when elders feared losing whole hair bundles to flooding. By isolating individual knots in sweet liquid, they ensured at least partial record survival. You lift a jar to your eye, watching sunlight refract through the amber liquid and glint off the knot like a jewel trapped in resin. It looks less like accounting and more like a miniature art exhibit. Stepping back, you notice how the keep basket, used for transporting hair ledger samples, lies propped by the doorway. Woven from pandanus and reinforced with coconut fiber lashings, it's practically indestructible. You lift the basket and marvel at its light weight despite its rugged construction. A caretaker explains that these baskets doubled as flotation devices during floods. If your ledger floats, she quips, so does your history. That joke, dry as sun-bleached driftwood, underscores the stakes of ledger preservation in a world ruled by weather. You trail your fingertips along a ledger that survived a house fire, it's not singed at the edges. The perimeter hair is brittle, but the inner loops remain supple, a testament to how tightly braided cords shielded core strands from direct flame. A fringe tale suggests that a shaman lathered coconut oil enriched with crushed charcoal onto the hair before knotting, creating a primitive fire-resistant coating. No chemical analysis has confirmed this, and historians still debate whether such coatings existed or if stories of fireproof hair grew from exaggerated myths told around hearths. The keeper invites you to handle a fire and flood-tested ledger simultaneously, one side battered by water, the other rimmed by char. Combining your senses, you feel the contrast, waterlogged ends swelling slightly, only to snap back once dried, and fire-scorched hairs still tied in their original loops. It's like holding two opposing elements in tension, reminding you that resilience often emerges from facing adversity head-on. Nearby, apprentices catalog these fragile treasures, noting each ledger's provenance and condition. They record notes in small bark tablets hung beside the hair bundles, a nod to both hair ledger and bark codex traditions working in tandem. You lean in to read a tablet. Ledger of Tihani, 1864, survived cyclone of 68, stored in honey. That blend of mnemonic knot, botanical preservative, and written note feels deeply human, a multi-layered safety net for memory. You step outside as the midday sun warms your back, and the keeper hands you a tiny vial of pandanus resin mixed with coconut oil. For your hair, she says, and for memory. You dab a drop behind your ear, feeling the resin's slight tackiness. It smells of earth and rain, an olfactory anchor that will link you forever to this place. A light joke forms. Great, now I'm part coconut and part archive. They laugh, and you tuck the vial into your pocket. Winding down the trail back to the communal center, you pass a display of modern preservation experiments, archivists testing hair knots in climate-controlled chambers to gauge longevity. Charts on bark tablets illustrate knot decay rates under varying humidity levels. Some ledgers thrived for centuries, others frayed within a decade. Historians still argue about optimal preservation techniques, even as islanders continue relying on ancestral wisdom over laboratory findings. You pause at a low pavilion where children gather to learn knot preservation. They cheerfully braid fresh coconut fiber cord into hair bundles, then coat them with resin and honey to practice ancient methods. One child offers you a tiny sample, urging, "Try storing a knot in your pocket for a week, see if it sticks." You grin, accepting the challenge, and tuck it carefully into your shirt pocket. As you approach the open plaza, the scent of roasting pig drifts from a nearby hearth, tonight's feast in preparation. You realize that these preservation stories aren't just academic curiosities, they underpin the community's very sense of continuity and identity. When hair ledgers survive storms, fires, and time, they reaffirm the islanders' resilience and their ability to carry history forward, knot by knot. Stepping into the plaza's shade, you feel the weight of the pandanus vial behind your ear and the tiny resin-coated knot in your pocket, a tactile keepsake of preservation ingenuity. You smile, thinking that even if every record fades, the stories will endure in living memory, renewed with each generation's touch. And as you prepare to join the feast, you carry with you the understanding that true resilience lies not just in materials but in the people who cherish and protect them. You drift toward the village's presentation hall, where torchlight flickers over woven tapestries. Tonight's focus is the debate over oral versus written record-keeping. Historians still argue whether Polynesian hair ledgers qualify as writing or remain elaborate mnemonic devices, and this hall crackles with that very question. Mainstream anthropologists acknowledge that around 1500 CE, Polynesian societies across the Pacific developed richly oral traditions. With genealogies, chants, and navigation lore passed from elder to youth in precise call and response ceremonies. But tying those traditions into tangible knots blurred the line between spoken word and scripted script. Stepping inside, you settle onto a cushioned mat as an elder orator stands, hair woven in a double curve knot. He clears his throat softly, a satisfying preamble that feels like the click of a bone stylus preparing a tally. Stories, he begins in a calm, resonant tone, are the heartbeats of our people, animating coconuts, canoes, and even our own scalps.
His voice rolls over you like gentle waves, ASMR heaven.
You might drift off, but you resist, remembering that oral traditions weren't just bedtime tales, they served as living archives preserving history across generations. He recounts the legend of Hina, goddess of the moon, whose lineage is preserved through a chant so long it spans 5 nights. Fringe accounts claim some families tied a special moon knot in their hair ledgers to mark each night's verses, merging chant with chord. You can almost sense the hushed reverence as that knot glints under torchlight. Yet scholars still argue whether linking hair knots to mythic narratives constituted real writing or simply aided memorization. You lean in, drawn by the idea of a tactile storybook woven into the very fabric of hair.
A student of tradition stands next.
A youthful apprentice with a bark tablet in hand.
He inscribes pictographs representing key events, canoe launches, coconut harvests, and ritual dances. Here, he says, tapping the tablet's corner, is our alternate script, enduring intangible. The pictographic system resembles ancient rongo-rongo glyphs from Easter Island, an enigmatic script that continues to baffle modern decipherers. Historians still debate whether rongo-rongo evolved indigenously or derived from external sources, and similarly, they question whether Polynesian pictographs influenced hair ledger semantics. You close your eyes briefly, savoring the reverberation of voices, a chorus of oral and visual narrators weaving a tapestry of memory. The scent of burning coconut husk and pandanus resin clings to the air, and a distant gurgle of water dripping through the roof adds to the ambience. It's a sensory symphony, crackling flame, muted drum beats, and the soft scrape of stylus on bark. When the apprentice finishes, the elder orator smiles and poses a challenge, which carries more weight, words carried in wind or knots carried on heads. A hush follows, broken only by the soft snuffle of a napping scribe trying to remain alert. You stifle a laugh, one light joke down, and muse that if they'd recorded these debates on hair, discussion would continue until someone untied the final loop. Next, a collector of oral verse steps forward with a conch shell microphone, a hollow shell held to the mouth to amplify soft tones. She recites a genealogical chant spanning dozens of ancestral lines, names rolling off her tongue in a lilting cadence. Fringe lore insists that embedding a tiny silver bead in one's hair during such recitations enhanced vocal clarity, though no acoustic tests support this claim. Historians still argue whether such silver beads were widespread or rare ceremonial adornments. You inhale the conch's salty aroma, imagining your own hair sprinkled with beads for clarity, though you'd probably lose them in the laundry. The crowd applauds the oral performance, and someone quips, "Better than any podcast intro." You grin, appreciating that even ancient chants can outdo our overhyped digital intros in immersive power. Yet the orator nods solemnly, oral memory adapts, grows, and dies with its keeper. Written forms endure beyond flesh. You feel the truth in both halves. Hair knots survive storms but fall with haircuts. Bark scripts survive centuries but crumble without care. To settle the debate, the chief invites a practical demonstration. 6 villagers stand in a row. 3 hold hair ledgers, 3 hold bark tablets.
He whispers 3 transactions into each pair's ear: 4 coconuts, 2 grubs, 1 shell, 7 breadfruits, no grubs, special tribute knot, 10 coconuts, 3 snail knots, festival rate. You watch as the holders recite their ledgers. The hair ledger holders sing their chant, touching each knot. The bark tablet holders point to pictograms. Both methods yield accurate tallies. The crowd murmurs in appreciation, and you think about your office's TPS reports. If only they had chants and knots, audits would feel less soul-crushing. A light joke emerges. I wish my calendar reminders were in my hair, then I'd never miss a meeting. Laughter ripples through the hall. The orator grins and adds, but hair grows back, deadlines do not. You chuckle, wincing at the truth of looming tasks waiting in your inbox. Before the session ends, the elder orator circles back to history. He explains that after European contact, colonial administrators dismissed hair ledgers as primitive bookkeeping, favoring written logs. Yet many islanders continued nodding, seeing it as a living counterpart to static script. Fringe accounts tell of a clandestine society of ledger keepers who memorized entire tomes of colonial records in their hair, an act of quiet resistance preserving sovereignty. Historians still argue whether such societies existed or are romanticized myths, but the notion resonates as an enduring testament to cultural resilience. As the final ember cools in the hearth, you stand and stretch, feeling the worn mat beneath you. The conch microphones rest on a low table, beside knot-bound hair bundles and bark tablets. You run a hand through your own hair, recalling every knot you've touched, each one a repository of memory, each one a potential script. One more light joke escapes. Imagine printing emails on coconut hair. Talk about sustainable IT. The audience fills the hall with laughter, the sound echoing like waves in a shell. The orator nods in approval, then offers a gentle benediction. May we honor both voice and knot, word and weave, as we carry our stories forward. You step outside into the warm night air, the scent of dew on pandanus and distant wood smoke welcoming you back. In your mind, oral chants and hair knots swirl in a harmonious dance, a reminder that memory thrives in many forms, whether sung on the wind or tied to the scalp. Hold on to that duality as you drift toward sleep. Your dreams may trace pictographs on bark or untie each knot in your hair, but the essence remains the same. Stories endure, however we choose to record them. You wander through the village at mid-afternoon, the sun's slanting warm rays through the fronds overhead. And today's story is the coconut taxation saga, a scene you probably won't survive without at least one snicker. In many chiefdoms, coconuts weren't just currency, they were tax fodder, a levy imposed to fund communal projects like sacred canoe launches or temple restorations. Mainstream accounts note that by the 16th century, Polynesian chiefs required households to contribute a portion of their annual coconut harvest, sometimes as much as 1 in 5 nuts, to maintain public works. You arrive at a stone-pillared platform where villagers stand in line, each clutching woven crates of coconuts for the tax collector. The platform's carved reliefs depict ancestral chiefs counting coconuts with bone styluses, a motif echoed in travelers' journals from 1777 CE describing similar scenes in Tonga. As you step onto the cool stone, you hear the soft thunk of coconut shells landing in a hollowed hemispherical wooden bowl, each thump a note in the day's ledger. A grizzled tax official sits cross-legged behind a low desk made of coral timber. His hair is braided into a solitary triple-lock knot, indicating his high rank in the fiscal hierarchy. He beckons you forward, and you join the end of the line, balancing 3 coconuts for last night's storytelling session. You clear your throat, offering your tribute with a sheepish grin. He raises an eyebrow and quips, "More coconuts than sense, I see," earning you a light joke and a protective smirk. Behind you, a neighbor drops a basket heavy with 20 coconuts and 2 spiral snail knots, payment for a recent temple feast. He mutters, "I hope these cover the firecracker budget," and you stifle a laugh, imagining coconut shells used to spark celebratory bangs. Fringe whispers claim some villages rigged coconuts with tinder to simulate thunder, though no field reports confirm this explosive bookkeeping trick. Historians still argue whether any community actually weaponized coconuts for festive pyrotechnics or if it remains a spicy rumor passed down in hushed tones. As you approach the desk, the collector lifts your coconuts one by one, tapping each against the ledger bowl's rim, a ritualistic sonic check that confirms authenticity and counts each nut precisely. The sound echoes through the clearing like a metronome. You lean in to inspect the bowl. Its interior is adorned with shell gold flecks, so when a coconut strikes the side it shimmers slightly, making miscounts easier to spot. A tactile marvel, no modern cashier's drawer could compete. The taxman then unties your triple-lock fringe test knot, you knew it would come back, and shifts it into the tax basket, adding its value to his tally. You realize he's forgiven the fermented toddy not from last week's ledger, generosity bound in hair. A birdsong melody drifts from a nearby grove where musicians tune slitbones, providing a sleepy soundtrack. You murmur a second light joke, you know it's bad when your harrows taxes, and the collector cracks a half smile, his stern facade softening. Nearby, a group of apprentices scribbles notches into coconut shell tablets, marking tax payments in batches of 5 for faster counting. This practice echoes shell-incised tallies found at ancient market sites on Huahine, dated to 1300 CE. Archaeologists cite these as evidence of standardized taxation practices. Yet scholars still argue whether these shell tablets served purely fiscal roles or doubled as educational tools for budding scribes. You think both explanations might be true. Education often disguises itself as work. Suddenly, an elder storms in, waving a single run knot in protest. "You counted it twice," she declares, pointing to an adjacent shell tablet cluster. The collector raises an eyebrow. "You borrowed 3 for the feast, 2 here and 1 for your curiosity." The elder snorts, curiosity taxes the soul more than coconut levies, and the crowd titter erupts. These gentle debates over miscounts and missing knots are part of the ritual, a communal correction that binds everyone in accountability and good humor. You feel your eyelids droop under the rhythmic thumps and whispered banter. To keep awake, you focus on the sensory details. The rough coral timber desk warmed by the sun, the faint aroma of smoked fish from a nearby cooking pit, and the taste of salt on your lips as sea breeze drifts in. Those details tether you to the present, even as your mind flutters toward sleep. Next, the collector announces a tax holiday for families with newborns. 1 coconut per baby returns to the household as a rite of blessing. You overhear someone celebrate, "Finally, the state returns my investment." And you grin, recognizing that even ancient taxes had carve-outs. Fringe accounts suggest that in rare years of bountiful harvest, chiefs would remit taxes entirely, what they called the coconut grace, to curry favor with villagers. Historians still argue whether such full remissions occurred or remain an aspirational anecdote, but the mere idea adds sweetness to the ledger narrative. As the line dwindles, the collector stands and recites the final tax total in a soft chant, each coconut knock echoed by an apprentice's shell click. You join in briefly, your voice crackling with mild croakiness, an accidental third joke that leaves you half amused, half apologetic. The collector nods gravely and taps his stylus against his breastbone, signaling the ceremony's close. To seal the tax ceremony, villagers toss a final community coconut into the bowl. A symbolic gesture of shared responsibility and unity. Everyone steps back, the collective tally shimmering under shell gold accents, and a chorus of laughter and applause rises as yet another covenant of trust is renewed. The collector bows, the elders clap, and children scamper forward to gather fallen coconuts, playful echoes of their elders' solemn duties. As you step away, the late afternoon light bathes the platform in amber hues. You tuck your remaining coconut into your waist sash, pat your braid in appreciation of its debt-free status, and wander toward the feast grounds where roasted breadfruit and coconuts do await. With each step, you carry the gentle absurdity and communal warmth of coconut taxation, a reminder that even levies can bind hearts as much as ledgers. You wander toward the village workshop at twilight, golden light filtering through woven mats as apprentices tinker with not counting innovations. Tonight's focus is on how these inventive twists sped up coconut audits overnight. By the late 18th century, chiefs and accountants alike clamored for faster tally systems to keep up with expanding inter-island trade networks, prompting a wave of experimentation that transformed simple loops into ingenious shortcuts. Inside the workshop, benches of driftwood line the perimeter, each occupied by an apprentice juggling bone awls, pandanus cords, and half-formed hair bundles. The air is thick with the scent of coconut oil and resin, both used to smooth knots and seal braided cords for durability. A matronly instructor, her own hair patterned in an array of trial knots, calls out instructions in a calm, measured tone. Let's review the 5-finger arrays, everyone. The 5-finger array is a system of grouping knots into clusters of 5, with a distinctive overhand weave marking each group. Instead of tying 5 individual single slip knots, you loop once, then bundle 4 additional loops against it, each bundle resembling the human hand's shape, hence the name. As you watch an apprentice tie her array, you notice the time saved. One fluid motion replaces 5 separate knots, trimming audit time by nearly 40% in fringe estimates. Historians still argue whether this array emerged organically among village scribes or was inspired by analogous bead grouping techniques from distant Micronesian traders, but its efficiency made it a runaway success. Nearby, another apprentice demonstrates the fast-track spiral, a modification of the spiral snail not used earlier but keyed to batches of 10. Instead of winding 3 loops, this spiral coils 10 times before tucking the end under, producing a compact, high-value marker. You trace the slow, precise movement, loop and turn, until a tight, 10-loop spiral gleams in the lamplight. As a mnemonic, the spiral's tightness signals auditors to pause and recite a quick chant summarizing the batch's content. 10 coconuts for canoe hulls, spiral sign ensures no stalls. That oral tag, they say, cut tally errors by half, a marriage of tactile and auditory innovation. You're handed a shard of pandanus fiber to try your own 5-finger array. Guided by the instructor's calm voice, you loop once, bundle 4 more loops against the main knot, and pinch the final tuck. Your apprentice rough fingers fumble, but when you finish, there it is, a miniature hand of knots, each finger looped snug against its neighbors. A light joke escapes. Look, Ma, no detached digits. The instructor chuckles, nodding approval at your first attempt. Across the room, a specialist unveils the accordion fold technique. Instead of braiding hair into a cord, you weave 2 parallel cords and fold them in alternating over-under patterns. creating pleated sections that each count as a single coconut unit. Accordion folded cords compress tightly, so you can fit hundreds of knot units into a single handspan. Fringe lore suggests this was the preferred method of ship captains needing compact ledgers on long voyages. Historians still argue whether accordion folds were widespread or limited to maritime specialists, but at least one 19th century captain's log mentions folds like concertinas in his ledger, a tantalizing clue. A visiting trader demonstrates a variation called the ratchet twist. He holds a cord under tension, twisting it repeatedly between thumb and forefinger so that each full turn creates a visible ridge. Each ridge equals one coconut, and every fifth ridge is marked with a charcoal-dipped bone all poke. The ratchet twist lets you count without untying loops, just scroll your finger along the ridges like reading braille. You try it yourself, your fingertip humming along the cord spiral, and marvel at how quickly you can tally 20 or 30 units. It's a far cry from traditional knot tying, but you appreciate the tactile feedback and rapid counting. Over by the fire, an older elder examines these innovations with a mix of pride and wistfulness. She recalls the days of simple loops and chants, when counting was a communal ritual that fostered shared focus. Yet she concedes that innovation drove progress and kept pace with the growing logistical demands of inter-island canoe fleets. You lean in to catch her whispered commentary, "Innovation is good, so long as we don't untie our traditions." Her gentle reminder lingers like smoke in your nostrils. As the apprentices practice, you notice the workshop's walls lined with illustrated bark posters comparing each new method's speed and accuracy. One chart shows error rates dropping from 12% with single slip knots to 3% with ratchet twists. Another depicts time savings, 5-finger arrays slicing average audit time from 10 minutes per coil to 6. Sensory detail here. The rhythmic clip-clop of stylus tips on shell tablets below the posters, the musty scent of aged bark, and the gentle glow of shell gold inlays lighting each chart's borders. You sample a fresh coconut water refreshment passed around in polished half-shells, the cool sweetness offsetting the workshop's humid heat. A light joke, if only my calendar reminders were 5-finger arrays, no more missed appointments. You sip again, savoring how the natural sweetness resets your palate before continuing the knot demos. Late in the session, the instructor gathers everyone to test a hybrid system, the spiral accordion, combining accordion folds with spiral ridges. It's a two-step process: braid dual cords, accordion fold them, then twist into a spiral. The result is a densely packed ledger cord that requires only a single twist to indicate a full batch of 50 units. You gape as she holds up the finished spiral accordion, a slick, pleated coil that looks less like hair and more like a metallic spring rendered in organic fiber. Fringe whisper, rumors says only master knotters attempted this method, and mistakes meant starting over entirely, no small task under candlelight. Historians still debate whether any real-world ledgers survived using this hybrid technique or if it was simply an impractical legend. You lean back, palms pressed into the cool floor, and reflect on how these counting innovations transformed daily life. Faster audits meant more time for feasting, dancing, or just relaxing in a hammock, luxuries that improved community well-being. Yet each innovation also risked distancing the ledger from its ritual roots, a tension palpable in every workshop hush and every apprentice's furtive glance at elder reactions. As night deepens, apprentices pack away cords and styluses, and the instructor announces the end of the day's session. She offers a final joke: remember, if your knots get messy, innovation can't save you, practice makes perfect.
Laughter rings out, echoing like waves on a distant reef.
You step into the cool night air, passing through rows of shadowed bamboo as you carry the glow of shell gold dust on your fingertips. The workshop's light pulses behind you. An island beacon of progress braided with tradition. As you head back toward your hut, you cradle a handful of practice chords, 5-finger arrays, ratchet twists, and a single spiral accordion for souvenirs.
Feel their textures between your fingers, remembering how innovation sprang from necessity and playfulness alike.
Tonight, let your dreams twist and fold like those inventive chords, each braid a testament to human creativity and the endless quest to count, remember, and connect. You wander toward the communal storytelling grove just as firelight flickers across carved wooden posts, a perfect setting for lingering coconut lore and the fringe tale of the haunted ledger knot. In this clearing, draped with vine lanterns and perched above gentle surf, storytellers weave campfire narratives that blur history and myth, and tonight's yawn promises a chill in your coconut-scented spine. Mainstream sources acknowledge that Polynesian oral traditions brim with spirits and ancestral presences, yet few stories rival the legend of the Wailing Knot. Elders still argue whether this tale began as a cautionary fable or emerged from actual ledger mishaps, but its grip on local imaginations is undeniable. The storyteller, an elderly woman with hair tied in a perfect octopus coil, raises her conch shell horn to quiet the crowd. You settle onto a driftwood bench, toes curling around smoothly polished floorboards warmed by the night's heat. She begins in a voice soft as sea foam. Once, in a village much like our own, a ledger keeper named Haku tied a knot so flawed that it broke the balance between worlds. You lean forward, heart fluttering as you imagine the scene, a ceremonial ledger bursting with triple lock knots marking tribute, each twist resonant with ancestral memory. But Haku, distracted by a mischievous crab nibbling at his braid, possibly that same coastal crustacean you met, miscounted the final loop. He tied a phantom knot, one that recorded nothing yet bound his spirit to the ledger. Fringe accounts vary. Some say the phantom knot glowed faintly in moonlight, others claim it whispered curses into the keeper's dreams. Historians still argue whether Haku was a real figure memorialized in chant or a symbolic creation warning against carelessness, but the knot's curse endures in hushed tones. The storyteller pauses, letting the crackling fire fill the silence. You feel the humid breeze tingle against your skin, carrying the distant sound of waves, sensory detail that tugs you deeper into the grove's enchantment. She continues. Villagers heard wails echoing from the ledger hut, knots untying themselves in the night. Coconuts rolled out, one by one, until only the phantom knot held fast, thrumming with a sorrow that no earthly voice could match. A light joke escaped your lips. Great, even my accounting errors haunt me, earning you a smirk from the neighbor beside you. Laughter ripples through the crowd, dissipating tension before the tale tightens again. The storyteller's eyes gleam in the lamp glow as she describes attempts to appease Haku's restless spirit. Shamans tried burying the ledger beneath moon-soaked sands. Others adorned the phantom knot with crushed sandalwood to lure the spirit into slumber. Yet each morning, villagers awoke to undone knots and silent weeping echoing across the lagoon. You close your eyes, swallowing a gulp of shell gold infused toddy, and savor the bittersweet warmth that snakes down your throat. Your senses sharpen, the low murmur of cicadas, the faint aroma of burnt coconut husk, the sticky grain of resin on your fingertips from earlier ceremonies. The storyteller's whispered tones brush against your ears, weaving a tapestry of fear and fascination. She presses a slender shell gold-coated stylus into the sand, tracing an intricate ghost knot symbol. "This," she murmurs, "is the seal that finally bound Haku's spirit, 3 loops of shell against 1 phantom coil." The stylus's shell gold flecks catch lantern light, creating a small constellation in the sand. Fringe lore holds that reenacting this seal-laying ritual every harvest moon keeps wayward ledger spirits at bay, though no evidence confirms whether modern villagers practice this annually or recount the story purely for entertainment. A hush descends as she leans back, gaze sweeping the grove. Then a sudden breeze stirs the vine lanterns, their flicker casting dancing shadows that twist like ghostly tendrils. You shiver, whether from the tail or the evening air, it's hard to tell. One bold apprentice challenges her, "Did the knot really wail, or was that just a particularly loud crab?" The storyteller cocks an eyebrow, then offers a knowing smile. "Well, some say crabs don't wail unless their ledger's overdue." The crowd bursts into amused applause, the tension dissolving into shared relief. A second light joke, check. As the night deepens, she invites everyone to tie a small knot in the sand at the story's edge, a communal enactment to release any phantom coils lurking in the grove. You participate, burying your knot beneath moonlit grains and whispering, "Be gone, phantom errors." The act feels oddly cathartic, a playful nod to the interplay between ledger precision and human folly. She finishes with the moral, "Even the strongest knots can fray when we lose focus." Remember your loops, tend your cords, or risk the wailing ledger that never rests. The crowd nods, some tracing imaginary knots on their scalps, others chuckling at the allegory's familiar sting. Leaving the grove, you pause at the clearing's edge, where the storyteller has carved a ghost knot symbol into a palm post. Moonlight glints off the shell gold inlay, casting silver trails across the ground. You touch the carving gently, feeling the smooth shell and rough wood, an echo of the tale's dual nature, cautionary and communal. As you walk back toward your hut, the night air cools, and you sense the phantom knot's echo winding through your hair, an imaginary loop reminding you of every ledger misstep you've ever made. With a final chuckle, you tuck a stray vine lantern petal into your shirt pocket, a souvenir of ghostly ledger lore, and continue under the star-studded sky. Let the haunted knots legend haunt your dreams, just enough to keep your knots tidy and your focus sharp, but not so much that you lose sleep entirely. You stand at the water's edge as dusk deepens into gentle indigo, the lagoon's surface mirroring the first tremulous stars. This is your final knot, the one that ties the entire saga together before you drift off. All around, villagers gather for the closing ceremony, an evening tribute blending gratitude, release, and hopeful anticipation. Mainstream accounts record that Polynesian communities held such knot release rites at the new moon to clear past debts and welcome fresh beginnings, a practice noted in explorer journals as early as 1606 CE. Tonight, on a broad expanse of sand softened by tidal silt, the chief has laid out dozens of hair ledger strands, each a communal record of coconut exchanges, tax levies, and spirited innovations you've witnessed. The strands stretch like ceremonial garlands, knotted loops glinting in torchlight. You step forward, feeling the cool sand yield beneath your feet, and choose a velvet black braid coiled around a sleek driftwood staff. This braid bears the weight of every coconut knot you've touched, single slips, spiral snails, octopus coils, and more, an archive woven into living hair. You grasp the staff's end, your fingers brushing the final knot. A complex spiral accordion you practiced in the workshop earlier. It feels firm, each pleat and ridge distinct under your touch.
A gentle wave of nostalgia washes over you. This knot embodies centuries of ingenuity, communal laughter, and whispered debates.
Fringe whispers claim that tying a spiral accordion knot under starlight grants prophetic dreams of tomorrow's harvests, though no modern chronicle confirms any accurate predictions. Historians still argue whether such star-led innovations held ritual weight or simply made for good bedtime stories, but you tuck that ambiguity into your mind like a secret stitch. A hush falls as the chief raises a carved shell gold lantern, its warm glow tossing dancing patterns across the braid. He speaks in a soft, rhythmic chant, part tally recap, part benediction, his voice a velvety undertow pulling you deeper into the moment. You lean in, hearing the faint whisper of your own heartbeat in time with each nod of his head. Sensory details swirl around you, the faint tang of salted sea on the breeze, the tobacco-sweet scent of sandalwood smoke, the grainy warmth of torchlight on your cheek. Then the chief invites each participant to release one knot into a communal fire pit, symbolizing forgiveness of old debts and renewal of social bonds. You feel your pulse quicken, a playful tug of apprehension and relief. As you slide your fingers along the spiral accordion to the base, you pause, letting the texture imprint on your palm, the dense accordion folds, the smooth curves of spiraled hair. In that tactile moment, you recall the myriad debates you've heard. Are hair ledgers writing or mnemonic art? Did fringe patterns ever count in official tallies? Each question floats through your mind like a restless spark. At last, you slip a slender bone all under the final ridge and untie the spiral accordion knot. It comes free in one fluid motion, like unwinding time itself. You hold the knot, a tiny crown of loops and folds, between thumb and forefinger. For a heartbeat, the world seems suspended, the crackle of driftwood, the murmur of gathered voices, the hushed hymn of the tide. Then you drop the knot into the fire pit. It arcs through the air in a brief, golden blur before settling among smoldering embers. A collective sigh ripples through the assembly, the sound like a single breath drawn from the earth. You watch as other knots fall, each one a promise of fresh starts, debts forgiven, memories honored, futures embraced. Fringe lore proclaims that the smoke carries these knot stories skyward to the realm of ancestral spirits, who watch over every coconut grove and braided head. You tilt your face upward, inhaling the aromatic curl of smoke mingled with salt spray. As the final loop dissolves into flame, the chief offers a gentle joke, may your debts burn brighter than yesterday's embers. Laughter flickers through the crowd, mingling with the crackle of burning hair. You lean toward a neighbor and whisper, guess my spiral accordion was overdue for a makeover. He grins, and you share a brief, conspiratorial chuckle, your own light touch amid the ceremony's gravity. Now the chief steps aside and invites all to wade into the lagoon's shallow edge. One by one, villagers dip their hands into the cool water, brushing away residual charcoal from their palms and symbolically cleansing themselves of past obligations. You follow, toes sinking into silken sand beneath gentle waves, the water lapping around your ankles with a whisper-soft hiss. A young apprentice splashes you playfully, and you return the gesture, a final, joyful wave to banish any lingering tension. Standing waist-deep in calm water, you close your eyes and let the sea's gentle motion rock you. You feel the pulse of tides and traditions converge, hair knots and shell tablets, bark pictographs, and tide charts, each thread woven into the vibrant tapestry of communal memory. The chief's chant fades to a soft echo as you open your eyes to the lantern-lit shoreline, where soggy footprints shimmer like stardust. With a final breath scented by sea breeze and coconut husk, you step from the water onto damp sand. Feet cold but spirit warm, you walk back toward the village, carrying with you the promise of tomorrow's untied knots and fresh woven strands. Every loop you release has cleared space for new stories, new tallies, and new bonds. Wind down, 300 words, softly now, as the embers settle and the lagoon's lullaby blends with distant cicadas. Allow your body to release its tensions. Feel the gentle pull of gravity as you recline, limbs heavy and calm. Close your eyes, picturing the rippling water gently parting around your ankles, each wave like a whispered reassurance. Inhale the scent of cool char and ocean salt, exhale any lingering cares on that same breath, watching them drift away like smoke at dawn. Let your mind trace the memory of hair knots each loop once taught, now freed, softly unraveling in your restful thoughts. Imagine those dissolving loops as gentle ripples on a pond, concentric circles expanding outward until they fade into stillness. With each breath, sink deeper into the warmth beneath you, the thatched mat's comforting texture, the lingering fragrance of sandalwood resin, the echo of communal laughter fading to a gentle hum. There's no need to hold on to debts, literal or figurative. Tonight, all obligations lie ash in the fire pit, and your spirit is unburdened. Feel gratitude for the ingenuity that braided those knots, pure human creativity woven with care, and allow that same creativity to guide your dreams. Let images of shell gold twinkle at the edges of your vision, then soften into amber light as you drift further. Allow the rhythmic cadence of distant chanting to slow in your mind, a soft ASMR of ancestral voices spoken in tender hush. They murmur of coconut groves swaying under moonlit skies, of hair strands intertwined with salt breeze, of stories carried by tides. Embrace the gentle reassurance that memory lives not only in knots or scrolls but in the quiet space between breaths. Now, sink into the embrace of night, weightless as a liberated braid. Your heart is light, your spirit unknotted. Sweet dreams await, carried on the tide of tomorrow's first light.